new evidence about Tupac and Biggie's and it completely flips the story we thought we knew. His Netflix series digs into gang alliances, industry pressure, never-seen police audio from Keef D, and insiders claiming the East-West feud was actually a
Tupac's has been the biggest secret in hip-hop. The world was kept guessing by rumors, plots, and unanswered questions until 2025, when everything we thought we knew was shattered.
For decades, Tupac and Biggie's were the ultimate hip-hop mystery, rumors, conspiracies, and unanswered questions swirling nonstop. But on December 2nd, 50 Cent dropped a Netflix doc that might finally pull back the curtain. Could the truth behind these legendary be closer than we ever imagined? For years, people have argued, speculated, fought, and even built entire YouTube channels around the mystery of Tupac Shakur's. But now, 50 Cent, of all people, has stepped into the conversation and dropped information so sharp, so specific, and so historically grounded that it has left even longtime hip-hop insiders stunned. And what's wild is that he didn't just comment on the case. He connected dots that were always there, just never fully lined up, until now. It honestly feels like one of those moments where someone casually says one sentence that suddenly makes 20 years of chaos make perfect sense. The biggest shift came from new testimonies, old confessions, and a fresh spotlight on the people who were actually there. And this time, it's not just vague rumors or barbershop theories, it's real voices, real tapes, real insiders who finally feel safe enough, or pressured enough, to talk. And somehow, 50 Cent has become the loudspeaker for that truth, boosting the details so the entire world hears what was once whispered in back rooms and unmarked offices. One of the most shocking revelations comes from Kirk Burroughs, a co-founder of Bad Boy Records, who looked back at the situation with decades of clarity. What he says is honestly chilling. According to him, there was orchestration behind Tupac's and Biggie was pushed straight into danger. Think about that for a second. This isn't a random fan. This is a man who watched the industry machinery from the inside. When he says orchestration, he's not talking about chance. He's talking about decisions, about leverage, about pressure, about a war that was bigger than just Tupac and Biggie, and Burroughs isn't alone. Several insiders interviewed for the new docuseries agree on one major point. Biggie did not want to go to Los Angeles. He didn't want to be anywhere near the West Coast at that time, and honestly, who could blame him? Tensions weren't just high, they were explosive. The energy after Tupac's shooting was dark, confrontational, and unpredictable. Biggie knew that walking into LA meant walking straight onto enemy soil. Even his closest friends said he could feel something wasn't right. But here's the part that feels like a gut punch. The label insisted he go anyway. Why? Because his new album, Life After Death, needed promo. Imagine that. One of the biggest artists in the world trying to protect his own life, telling people he doesn't feel safe, and still being told, you have to go. The album needs this. And just weeks later, he was gone. The docuseries paints a heartbreaking picture. Biggie didn't just end up in the wrong place. According to the people closest to him, he was ushered there. Now here's where 50 Cent comes in like a human spotlight. He's been using his massive platform to highlight something that too many people ignored for years. The real confession tapes of Keef D. The same confession that was sealed, buried, and hidden from the public for over a decade. These aren't rumors. These are recordings from Keef D's protected 2008 police confession, where he details Tupac's step by step, moment by moment, as if he's reading from a script he never forgot. And hearing these tapes now, in full, in context, changes everything.
Tupac.
It was really about both of them. Either one. It was
Tupac and Suge, you mean?
Yeah.
After the release of the new Diddy documentary titled The Reckoning, evidence suggests Diddy offered $1 million to 40 gang members at an event to take out Tupac. This would get the attention of the Las Vegas police, where it was announced.
In the audio, Keef D recounts the events leading up to the disturbing clarity. He describes the MGM Grand fight where Tupac and his crew jumped Orlando Anderson in the lobby after the Mike Tyson fight. According to him, that beating wasn't just a scuffle. It was the spark that lit the entire fuse. The Southside Crips weren't going to just walk away from that humiliation. They regrouped. They armed themselves. They moved with intention. Then comes the moment that sounds like it was lifted straight from a movie, but was tragically real. The crew setting up outside Club 662, Suge Knight's club, waiting for Tupac to show up. They didn't know when he'd arrive, but they knew he was coming. And that's when pure chance took over. The accidental spotting of Tupac's BMW on the Las Vegas Strip changed the entire night. One wrong turn, one delayed red light, one moment of visibility, and everything fell into place for the men hunting him. Keith D describes the U-turn that put their car right behind Tupac's. He talks about handing the gun to the back seat. He recalls Anderson allegedly saying, "Give it here, I'll And then, the part that's haunted hip-hop for decades, the eruption of bullets into the BMW, forever ending Tupac's life and rewriting music history. But here's the detail that has everyone shook. In these tapes, Keith D openly admits there was a bounty on Tupac and Suge Knight's heads. This wasn't just payback. This wasn't just anger. According to Keith, someone put money down, and the Crips only received half the bounty because Suge Knight survived. Let that sink in. The of one of the greatest rappers of all time wasn't just personal, it was transactional. And when 50 Cent shared and amplified this information, he didn't do it for clout. He did it because it filled the gaps the public has been arguing about for nearly 30 years. It reframed the not as an emotional spiral or street beef gone too far, but as a paid hit, structured, funded, and executed with purpose. What makes all of this even heavier is the way the new docuseries and these confession tapes connect Tupac's to Biggie's fate. Because if Tupac's was orchestrated, if it followed a chain of decisions and money that most people never saw, then Biggie's might not have been random retaliation at all. It raises the terrifying possibility that Biggie's trip to Los Angeles wasn't just ill-timed, it was manipulated, that someone, somewhere, knew what danger awaited him. Watching 50 Cent break this all down, piece by piece, tape by tape, feels like watching a puzzle finally snap into place after decades of missing corners. And honestly, it leaves you wondering what the industry really knew, who benefited, and what's still being hidden today. Because if these tapes were sealed for years, what else is still locked away? And now that the truth is coming out, will the world finally accept what insiders have whispered all along?
Kerr's murder feels like it's moving at a snail's pace. It took 27 years for an arrest to be made.
There's only been one person ever arrested and charged in connection to the rappers, and that man was supposed to head to trial next month. I'm Elizabeth.
It's honestly crazy how, after almost 3 decades of theories, rumors, documentaries, and endless debates, it took 50 Cent of all people to put the final puzzle pieces of Tupac's together. And what's wild is that he didn't stumble into the truth by accident. He built a documentary that lines up eyewitness accounts, police recordings, sealed confessions, and unheard footage in a way that finally makes the entire story feel complete. For years, we've had fragments, little bits of maybe, I heard, and someone once said. But now, for the first time, everything lines up cleanly, minute by minute. And honestly, it leaves you sitting there thinking, how did nobody show it like this before?
Went to the MGM Grand in Vegas to watch the Mike Tyson fight. After that fight, another fight broke out in the lobby of the hotel when someone from Suge's entourage spotted a man named Orlando Anderson. Surveillance video showed Tupac and others essentially jumping Orlando Anderson.
The documentary takes viewers back to that night in Las Vegas, the night that changed hip-hop forever. It starts right where the energy was the highest. Tupac celebrating Mike Tyson's 109-second knockout victory. You can almost picture it, the entire MGM Grand buzzing, crowds pouring out of the arena, Tupac smiling, excited, surrounded by friends and security. And then comes the moment that flipped the night from celebration to disaster. Trayvon Lane, a close associate of Tupac's, spots Orlando Anderson near the lobby. Anderson, at that time, wasn't just a random guy. He was a known Southside Crip and part of a crew that had already been in conflict with Death Row. The moment Lane pointed him out, things moved fast. The beating that followed was caught crystal clear on the MGM cameras, and the footage has been replayed 1,000 times. But the documentary makes you see it differently, not as a random scuffle, but as the spark that ignited everything that came next. When Tupac left the MGM after the fight, something important happened that most people don't talk about. His security was unarmed, not because they forgot, not because they were careless, but because Vegas police had warned them earlier that night not to carry. And this is where things get even more heartbreaking. Yaki Gaddafi, one of Tupac's closest friends, asked their bodyguard, "You got your gun, right?" It was a moment of instinct, a gut feeling that danger was nearby. But the bodyguard didn't have it. That single detail changes the whole mood of the story. They walked straight into a dangerous night without proper protection, and they knew it. From there, the documentary follows the timeline with almost painful precision. The white Cadillac that started tailing Tupac's BMW, The way it moved, slow, deliberate, creeping up on them as they drove through traffic. And then the moment everyone remembers, the arm extending out of the back window. Not a panic move, not a chaotic spray of bullets. It was controlled, intentional. In seconds, Tupac was hit 4 times. Suge Knight, sitting right beside him, tried to speed away, but the car swerved wildly. There's something chilling about hearing the police audio alongside this reconstruction because, for the first time, the timeline and the confession match perfectly. Every moment Keefe D described in his sealed testimony, the beating at the MGM, the Crips regrouping, the Cadillac pulling up, all of it lines up with footage, police communications, and witness statements. And then comes the part that still breaks people's hearts, no matter how many times they've heard it. Tupac fighting for his life for 6 long days. He was only 25. 25. The documentary doesn't dramatize it. It simply shows the reality. A young man who had the world in his hands, lying in a hospital bed, unable to escape the violence that followed him. It reminds you that behind the legend, behind the music, behind the controversy, was a real person who didn't deserve the way he went out.
Keefe D's own mouth and insider confessions are exposing something bigger. Whispers that the so-called East versus West beef wasn't just about rap pride, but a high-stakes game involving real money and real power. Once those lost recordings came out...
But here's where 50 Cent's documentary goes further than the others. It doesn't treat Biggie's like a separate tragedy. It argues what people inside the industry have whispered for years. Biggie's was the second half of the same war, the same escalating tension, the same forces pulling strings behind the scenes. 6 months after Tupac, Biggie visited Los Angeles, and just like Tupac in Vegas, he was under pressure. His label pushed him to go, pushed him to promote, pushed him even when he said he didn't feel safe. And of course, he didn't. The air was still thick with suspicion, grief, and anger. Yet he still attended the Soul Train after party. That night, according to the documentary, the setup felt eerily familiar. A dark Chevy Impala rolled up beside Biggie's SUV. The shooter fired 4 rounds into the vehicle. Biggie died instantly. He was just 24, even younger than Tupac. The series includes never-before-seen footage from that night, footage that shows the chaos immediately after the shooting. People running, screaming, crying, flashing lights everywhere. The energy of confusion and shock is overwhelming. You watch it knowing what's coming, but it still hits like a punch. What makes these revelations even heavier is the testimonies the documentary brings forward. One of the most emotional parts is Biggie's mother, Valletta Wallace, who has always believed her son's killing wasn't random and wasn't just a street retaliation. She believes industry forces were involved, that her son was caught in a web of decisions and power plays far bigger than anything people saw publicly. For years, her claims were brushed aside as grief talking, but when her words are placed next to the timeline of Tupac's murder, the police audio, the confession tapes, and the industry pressure Biggie faced, suddenly her belief doesn't sound like speculation. It sounds like truth. 50 Cent's documentary doesn't claim to magically solve everything, but what it does is something no other production has fully accomplished. It aligns the facts. It shows the full chain of events. It reveals the pattern, the interactions, the motivations, the decisions that tied both together. And in doing so, it gives people a version of the story that feels complete for the first time. After watching it, you can't go back to thinking these were 2 separate tragedies. They were chapters in the same story, a story that started with music but ended in because too many powerful people made choices behind closed doors and left 2 young men to pay the price. It's hard to overstate how shocking it is that after nearly 3 decades, 50 Cent has come forward with a documentary that finally sheds real light on the of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. For years, fans, journalists, and amateur detectives alike have tried to piece together what happened on those fateful nights in 1996 and 1997, but the stories never fully aligned. There were always gaps, contradictions, rumors, and conspiracy theories, and without the inside perspective, it was impossible to know the truth. What makes 50 Cent's project different is the and precision of the evidence he presents. For the first time, viewers can watch a reconstruction that lines up police reports, witness testimonies, audio recordings, and even previously unseen footage in a way that paints a coherent picture. It's one thing to read about Tupac being shot or Biggie dying in a car outside a party. It's another to see and hear the minute-by-minute chain of events that led to those tragedies and to understand how much of it could have been prevented. Tupac's case is almost a study in investigative frustration. From the very beginning, the Las Vegas Police Department faced immense challenges. Many of the witnesses were part of Tupac's entourage or connected to death row records, and they were understandably hesitant to talk. Street code dictated silence. Snitching was not an option. That created a massive barrier to collecting reliable information. Leads were pursued slowly, sometimes not at all, and critical evidence that could have led to arrest was mishandled or ignored. One of the biggest blows came with the death of key witnesses like Yaki Gaddafi, who was killed shortly after Tupac. Gaddafi's first-hand account of what happened during the MGM grand altercation and the subsequent pursuit could have been crucial, but it was lost forever. For law enforcement, this was a nightmare. For fans and historians, it left the story incomplete for decades, and that incompleteness created a breeding ground for speculation, conspiracy theories, and public frustration. Then there's Biggie's case, which is even more complicated and tragic when you consider how the investigation was conducted. The Los Angeles Police Department was in turmoil at the time, deeply embroiled in the Rampart corruption scandal. Officers who were supposed to protect and serve were instead implicated in widespread misconduct. Some evidence even suggested that certain officers were tied to death row records, and some may have moonlighted as bodyguards for individuals involved in the conflicts between East and West Coast rap factions. The lines between law enforcement, gang activity, and music industry politics were blurred, creating an environment where the truth could be hidden in plain sight. Witnesses either refused to testify, feared retaliation, or tragically, ended up themselves. There was even testimony pointing toward a hitman allegedly hired as retaliation for Tupac's death. Yet with no one willing or able to come forward, the case stagnated. Despite countless hours of investigative work, nothing was solved, no arrests were made, and no prosecutions followed. Two of the biggest cultural icons in history had been taken from the world, and justice was nowhere in sight. What makes 50 Cent's documentary especially remarkable is the way it connects these dots, revealing the broader pattern of orchestrated that many people suspected but had never seen laid out with evidence. For Tupac, the narrative starts with the MGM Grand. Tupac was celebrating Mike Tyson's quick knockout with friends and associates when Trayvon Lane spotted Orlando Anderson. That brief moment of recognition triggered a confrontation that was captured on security cameras, a beating that would set off a chain reaction, ending in Tupac's death 6 days later. But the doc doesn't stop at the visuals. It also presents Keith D's 2008 protected confession. These recordings had been sealed for years, and now they're part of the public record for the first time. In his own words, Keith D recounts how the Crips armed themselves after the MGM Grand fight, how the crew set up at Club 662, and how the fatal encounter with Tupac unfolded after they accidentally spotted his BMW. He even admits that there was a bounty on both Tupac and Suge Knight, and that they only received half because Suge survived. For decades, people debated whether Tupac was random or personal. This confession reframes the event as a paid hit, meticulously planned and executed, rather than an impulsive act of street anger. Biggie's death, coming just 6 months later, is framed in the documentary as the inevitable continuation of the same conflict. 50 Cent makes a compelling case that Biggie didn't accidentally end up in Los Angeles. Industry insiders reveal that he was pushed to travel under label pressure to promote life after death, despite knowing the territory was dangerous. The tension between East Coast and West Coast factions, already heightened by Tupac's, made LA an environment where even a casual outing could become deadly. On March 9th, 1997, Biggie left the Soul Train after party and climbed into his SUV. A dark Chevrolet Impala pulled up alongside, shots were fired, and Biggie was instantly. The doc includes never-before-seen footage of the aftermath, capturing the chaos, shock, and horror of a scene that had become legendary, but largely mythologized. Through interviews and archival materials, it also shows that Biggie's mother, Valletta Wallace, has long believed that industry forces were involved, a theory that, when combined with the other evidence, feels increasingly plausible. The film doesn't just present them. It also explores why both cases went cold for so long. Tupac's case was hindered by uncooperative witnesses, slow pursuit of leads, and the tragic deaths of critical individuals. Biggie's case, meanwhile, suffered under systemic corruption, possible officer involvement with death row, witnesses who refused to testify, and the deaths of potential informants. Essentially, both investigations were sabotaged by circumstance, mismanagement, and systemic failure. The result is a bitter reality. Two of the most influential voices in music history were silenced, and justice has never been fully served. For anyone who grew up with their music, it's not just disappointing, it's infuriating. The brilliance of 50 Cent's work is that it doesn't try to sensationalize the tragedies. Instead, it focuses on clarity, connecting testimonies with recordings, footage, and context. It reconstructs the events in a way that is both informative and emotionally compelling, allowing viewers to grasp the scope of the influence of industry pressure, and the deadly consequences of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. Watching the series feels like finally seeing the pieces of a decades-old puzzle snap into place. Each confession, each clip, each insider testimony reinforcing the grim reality that these were not mere coincidences. They were the product of a system where money, power, and reputation took precedence over safety and human life. By the end of the documentary, it's impossible not to feel a mix of awe, sadness, and frustration. Awe at the depth of 50 Cent's investigation and the courage of those who finally came forward. Sadness for Tupac and Biggie, two men taken far too young, leaving behind legacies that would inspire generations, but also a void that can never be filled. And frustration at a system, both law enforcement and music industry, that allowed such violence to occur with no accountability. For fans and historians, the series finally offers a coherent narrative, one that contextualizes both as interconnected, calculated, and deeply tragic. And even if the full truth about every individual responsible may never be known, the doc changes the conversation forever, giving people a version of events grounded in evidence rather than speculation. Ultimately, 50 Cent's documentary does more than revisit old crimes. It challenges viewers to think critically about how violence, power, and corruption intersected with hip-hop culture in the 1990s, and how the deaths of Tupac and Biggie were preventable. It's a stark reminder that fame and talent do not always protect against danger, especially when larger systems and human greed are involved. And while we may never see full justice for either, the series finally gives the world clarity, context, and a chance to understand the truth behind two of the most shocking tragedies in music history. For decades, the story felt fragmented and unsolvable. Now, thanks to 50 Cent, it finally feels whole, haunting, and impossible to ignore.